Dear friends, dear colleagues, good morning, good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us to these Workers' Voices sessions during the 109 sessions of the International Labour Conference. My name is Mamadou Soare. I am the head of communications and publications at the ILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities. We are here today to discuss about a global crisis which affects all of us. As you probably know, the COVID-19 pandemic has put the world of work on its knees. This global crisis reveals also multiple and growing inequalities across the world. However, since the pandemic started, workers and their organizations have played a crucial role to mitigate the impact of this global crisis. With the new vaccines, we can say that there is a hope to move to the recovery. But the big challenge is how to ensure that a human-centered recovery from the COVID-19. We can also ask ourselves about the role of trade unions in order to ensure that all workers will be protected. So to discuss about these issues, I'm very pleased to welcome two trade unionists today. First, I would like to welcome Mrs. Sulistri Sulistri. She is the acting chairperson of the All Indonesian Trade Unions Confederation, KSBSI. Thank you, Sulistri, for joining us later this night from Jakarta. I'm very, very happy to have you among our speakers. The second one is Peter Waldorf. He is actually the international advisor of the Danish Trade Union Confederation, FH Denmark. Welcome to you, Peter. And I would like really to thank also our audiences who are following us via Zoom and Facebook. Please join this conversation also, dear audiences, in order to share any questions or comments, and I will be very pleased to share it to our panelists. Now, let me turn to you, Sulistri. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is a global human catastrophe. However, unions have continue to play an important role to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. Sulistri, I just want to ask you one question. Perhaps could you share your experience from Indonesia in the fight of COVID-19? Over to you, Sulistri.
Yeah, thank you, Mamadou. Good morning or good evening in Jakarta. So I just received my second jab of vaccine by Sinovac last week. The trade union activists like me and some colleagues in KSBSI and also in other union also received the vaccine. I think this is very important for us as a trade unionist to have vaccine because we often meet with members at plant level. I'd like to thanks to the government of Indonesia for working so hard to make vaccine available in Indonesia. I think Indonesia is relatively better than us in Indonesia already. More than 18 million people got their first jab and more than 11 million people got their second jabs. During the first wave of COVID pandemic, the Indonesia government did not take drastic measure of lockdown to allow the economy to still operate while following health protocol. There are government subsidies to protect jobs, income subsidies, extension of social protection, and many social assistance to those affected by COVID-19. People are very thankful for the existence of universal healthcare program in Indonesia, which is already covered more than 220 million people, or around 85% population by now. In addition to that, COVID-19 treatment and inoculation of vaccine is free. This is self-evidence on how important universal healthcare for the people. Of course, this is not perfect. There are many things that we need to improve in Indonesia. If we want to create an adaptive social protection in time of this crisis like this? Obviously, after almost 2 years of pandemic, this is not only a health crisis, but also a social and economic crisis. Millions of workers, especially workers in informal economy, domestic workers, migrant workers, workers in digital platform, and also other precarious type of employment are not covered by Social Security. There is serious problem regarding eligibility of the program coverage benefit. I come from the Federation of Food, Beverage, Tourism and Restaurant, Hotel and Tobacco of KSBSI. This is one of the sector hardest hit by pandemic, and this measure to continue. Restaurant and hotel are closed. Tourism attraction like Bali are closed for tourists, and all done, the line are affected very badly. Lots of our members lost their job, and unfortunately, so they have no saving or income replacement. This has become a really serious problem. They fall back in poverty, but KSBSI try very hard to avoid this to not happen. We conducted social dialogue with the employer at the company level on how to protect jobs and income. We also conducted the social dialogue at the district, province, and also national level to ensure that the government of Indonesia takes correct policy to save life, protect job and income for as many workers as possible.
Thank you, Sister Sulistri. Let me now turn to you, Peter. What is your experience from Denmark in combating the COVID-19? Your microphone, Peter.
Yes, thank you so much, and thanks for reminding me to unmute my mic. And hello, Sulistri. It was good to hear your experiences from Indonesia. And I'm really pleased that you are already progressing when it comes to the vaccines. When it comes to Denmark and our experiences during the pandemic, I have to say I think we felt the same from the outset, that this was really serious, and we had a quite early lockdown already in March of last year. But was also came very rapidly was that the government, together with the social partners, with the employers' organizations, and with the trade union organizations, started working very closely together to see how could you mitigate the negative effects on people and on businesses. And in fact, I think the latest number is that we have concluded some 16 tripartite agreements over the past 16 months, simply to be able to secure the support of the workers who had well, they were in, you could say, in the big risk to lose a job, but to be able to retain the job through some different kinds of support, where you can say that the public finances was also giving support for the employers. And I think that has been of a tremendous importance, that we have had this understanding and the trust between the government and the social partners, that we have to work together on this. I think that's really been maybe some of the most important elements that we could build on what was already existing. And another part, of course, which has also been extremely important to be able to do what has been done, is that the public finances are quite strong, so that you would also have the financial means to do what you felt was necessary to support the people during this difficult time. There's been a lot of concerns, you can understand, about whether our hospitals and the healthcare system as such could deliver during this pandemic. And I would say so far, and now we are in a much better situation, of course, also with the vaccines and so on. So we can just see that now the number of people in hospitals is going down day by day, and in the northern part of hemisphere we are in summertime now. So we think we are on a good path towards getting over the pandemic. But again, I want to really reiterate that social dialogue, bipartite, and in this case tripartite, has played a crucial role to bring us where we are now.
Thank you, Peter. You mentioned about the importance of social dialogue, but also a message of hope about the vaccine. But as you know, one thing that the COVID-19 reveals is the fact that there is a multiple but also growing inequalities, let's say between the states, but also between people. So a good example is definitely the questions of access to this vaccine, in particular from the developing world, to eradicate this pandemic around the world. So my question to you will be to know what could be the role of unions in order to ensure that equity is at the heart of the human-centered recovery that government would like to implement in terms of the recovery policies.
I think we can address this in various levels. You can say what we are doing just now, and we are really on to this now in the COVID-19 committee, working during the ILC, and we are really trying hard to create this understanding that inequalities have been growing during this pandemic. We have seen really some grave negative developments. Also, when you look at the possibility to in fact deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, that here is really a risk, a huge risk, that we will be pushed backwards. People who have lost their jobs, their livelihoods, the most vulnerable people who will be in a very difficult situation. And again, when it comes to the access to vaccines, I think it's, of course, it's a personal issue for each and one of us, but it's also an issue for the companies, for the employers, because I mean they will also depend on that you have a rollout of a distribution of vaccines all over the world, since we are living in this globalized world where we are so much depending on, for instance, when it comes to the supply chains, to secure that you could have also a flow of goods in the future. Well, you are depending on that people get access to the vaccine in all corners of the world, and we really have a job to do there. And you can say at the very also local level, maybe also the unions can play a role in, of course, working with employers, but also with authorities and governments at various levels, really to push for this. I mean, I have also a strong passion when it comes to quality public services, and I think many of the unions in that sector will also be, you can say, already also before the COVID, being very active in also securing, for instance, access to vaccine for frontline healthcare workers who might be exposed to various diseases. So maybe you can also build on that commitment from the trade unions to secure their members, and also expand this to think, how can you do more here in these coming months, or it could be in a longer period of time, to secure that when it comes to COVID, that we really do something also as the trade unions at various levels to secure that vaccines will be distributed more equally.
Thank you, Peter. You mentioned about the fact that I think unions have to target also the frontline workers, but as well informal economy workers, who are, as you know, the majority of the workers worldwide. Let me turn to you, Sulistri. I just want to know from you, from your perspective, how can we ensure that equity will be part of the human-centered recovery policies to combat the COVID-19? What's your view on this?
Yeah, so the COVID-19 pandemic indeed exposes and exacerbates the existing inequality between rich and poor, not only between rich and poor people inside and outside the country, but also between rich countries and poor countries. There are multiple problems about vaccine. The layer of patents, technology on how to produce the vaccine, raw material, and other infrastructure for delivering vaccine from the factory to the people. So we are glad that many countries are now supporting the proposal of India and South Africa on a temporary waiver of vaccine patents. It was thanks to a lot of pressure from the union and other civil society organizations that a European Parliament voted a resolution to temporarily leave of the patents. But we know that waiver of the patent will take some time, and it is not an immediate resolution for our current crisis. Hundreds of people are dying every minute around the world. Most of this death, like in India, Nepal, Brazil, or Peru, could be avoided if we had a better public health infrastructure. It is said that years of austerity and commercialization of health and medicine has brought all of us to this tragedy. So the world has seen a moral deficit of a vaccine rollout. Vaccine should not be treated as donation or as political tools to exercise power, not for taking profit from people's suffering. For the short term, we also need to support for the WHO initiative of COVAX for equity access to vaccine. I think equity always at the heart of the trade union work. Trade union always play a crucial role when it comes to the redistribution of both income and power through the collective bargaining and social dialogue. As vaccines started to roll out in many countries, we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we need to engage in dialogue with all the stakeholders, the government, employer, trade union, and other social partners. Together, we have to decide our future in the world of work. We shouldn't allow current trend to eradicate our labor and social rights. The ILO Centenary Declaration is an important guidance for us to invest a human-centered agenda needed for a decent future is ours to decide it.
Thanks, Sulistri. You mentioned a very important message about the fact that, as you mentioned, that vaccine should not be an instrument for political pressure and everyone should have access to this. I just want to mention that since the pandemic started, the ILO has been at the front to support our constituent, mainly government, workers, and also employers organizations. The next video that we would like to show now was prepared by the ILO's Bureau for Workers' Activities in order to raise and engage with unions about their role to play during the lockdown shutdown and reopening processes. So to find out more, let's see the video. My question to you, Sulistri, is you see in the video that there are many actions that unions can do in order to mitigate the impact of COVID. So my question to you will be to know, what do you think about the role of unions in the context of the reopening of the workplaces? As you know, since now many governments are starting to have this reopening of the workplaces, what can be the role of unions in this during this process?
Yes, first allow me to not turn on my video to make my connection is better. So yeah, for the trade union, of course, we support the reopening of the workplace because more than 1 year, the member of my federation, especially who work in the hotel, receive their wages is 50%. So we hope with the reopening workplace, they will receive 100% of their wages. So, but as union, we need to ensure before the reopening of working place, the trade union should be ensured that the company have the safety procedure or safety protocol or health protocol, something like that. So we need to negotiate and dialogue to the employers if the company do not provide it yet the safety procedure or health protocol. So the safety procedure is also can be mentioned several things. Example like make sure that enough the cleaning supplies such as the soap and sanitizer, masker is sufficient provided by the working place. And then, of course, the sanitation is also important for the workers. And then facilities for the workers, the clean water for wash their hand, it also should be considered. And then the government or the employer should be make the COVID-19 guidance to remind the workers on the effect of the COVID-19. And then the third is, I think the employer also need to provide it the swab, the swab and also vaccine for the workers who do not get the vaccine yet. So the swab or the check of the health of the workers regularly is very important to ensure that to ensure or to reducing the COVID pandemic in the working place. But the key of this is a dialogue between employer, workers, of course, with the government is very important to have a healthy and safety working place for everybody.
Thanks, Sulistri, for stressing the importance of social dialogue in order to make sure that we will get out from this pandemic. One question, same question to you, Peter. What's your view about this, about the role of unions in the context of the reopening of the workplaces?
I think it depends a lot where you are in the pandemic. I am sure that there will be in many places a pressure to get back to normal, and I will say that you know, this to secure that you have your different aspects, what would allow you to get back to normal, that you have this in place, I think is very important. But what we have seen in our country is that we have been testing people enormously, but that has really also, I think, paid off in being able to control the spreading of the virus. So I would say to having the facilities to secure that people get tested, but also still that you observe the good advice that we have learned over the last year and some months when it comes to the sanitary issues and the social distancing. I think that's really important to bear in mind. And then, of course, I fully agree with what Sister Sulistri just said, that of course the health and safety committees in the workplaces are extremely important in taking up these issues. And I would say this in combination with, as I started really saying that the social dialogue has been extremely important, and I think it will continue to be very important when you are, you can say, bringing us back to more normal situations. But of course, at the end of the day, I mean, you have to do this in a way where you also protect people from not running into another wave of the pandemic. I mean, we have seen that in some places around the world, that the pressure maybe from the government side, or at least from some political groups, will be enormously to just to reopen and really not to observe that you still have a virus that can cause a lot of damage to people, to their lives, to their livelihoods, and so on. So I think it's about finding the right balance, and I'm quite sure that trade unions will have an important role to play in doing so.
So one lesson that we can learn from this COVID-19 pandemic is the fact that global problems like this crisis require global solutions. And you mentioned about the importance of social dialogues, which brings me to the importance of reinforcing multilateralism, but also global solidarity among all of us. So my question to you will be to know, in your view, Peter, how can the ILO and its constituents may reinforce the multilateralism and global solidarity to combat the COVID-19 crisis?
When I was preparing myself, I was thinking about that this pandemic is maybe, sometimes we had talked about global crisis, and we talked about the global financial crisis. We've been talking about the world wars, the World War I, the World War II, but it has not been affecting all people at the same time. But this pandemic has been affecting us all. We have all felt the consequences. And maybe that's just underlining why the global response is so important. But maybe to find a window of optimism. The ILO was founded after the First World War, with these famous words that you could not find lasting peace without social justice. And the Philadelphia Declaration came in 1944, when the Second World War was almost over. So these big crises causing a lot of pain for people. I mean, we should also use this opportunity to really embrace the opportunities we have to work together globally. And I think the ILO has played during this pandemic a very, very important role in addressing the issues related to the world of work. And what I would like to see in the future is that the ILO continues within the UN system and giving the guidance to the governments, to the employers, to the workers on how do we recover. And I think there are big opportunities also when we think about that. We still have these big issues related to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the climate crisis. We have really been reminded, all of us, about digitalization is here. What we're doing just now would not have been possible without all of us having some forms of access to the internet. So things are moving, and I think, you know, again, we have so many bright ideas, and we developed this centenary declaration 2 years ago, and as I've said, we are now sitting in the midst of working on a COVID-19 outcome document with a lot of, I think, very constructive. I hope they will end up being all the good ideas that we have developed also from the workers' side. But we really have some very strong recommendations, and not only in investing in universal access to healthcare and social protection, but also to recognize that the issue about inequality is something that we in general have to combat. And I think you see some trends that is really a threat to some basic human rights around the world, including the right to be part of democratic elections and so on. And we must avoid that this pandemic leads to a deterioration of these fundamental human rights and trade union rights. On the contrary, I really think that we should be able to take this crisis and say, okay, now we have to reconsider how globalization and the way we are working together, how can that also benefit ordinary people, not only those who own the big companies, because I think that would be a lost opportunity. And some say that you will always find opportunities when you want to come out of a crisis. And I can see a lot of opportunities if we really have the will, the commitment to do so.
Peter, you mentioned about some opportunities that we may want to use in order to have a quick recovery, and also the importance of two important instruments, which are definitely the ILO Centenary Declaration, which I think is really a visionary framework before the COVID-19, but also the UN SDGs. We will come back to that later. But let me now turn to you, Sulistri. What's your view about the role of ILO and also its constituents in order to reinforce this multilateralism and also the global solidarity in this context of COVID?
Okay, so the ILO has put a strong foundation in its 1988 Declaration on Fundamental Principle and Right at Work. All the ILO member states agreed and adopted this fundamental principle regardless of their ratification. The virus of COVID-19 does not recognize state border. Nobody is safe from this virus until everyone is safe. Therefore, it is very timely for the ILO to consider the right to safe and healthy working place as a fundamental right. By adopting occupational safety and health as fundamental right at work to the declaration, we will recognize sickness like COVID-19 as work-related disease where global responses needed. One of the global responses that we need the ILO to take a lead is to continue effort to promote comprehensive and adequate social protection for all, including floor and universal quality healthy care, so that no one is left behind. More international cooperation is needed to achieve this. Therefore, the ILO should take a lead on the creation of global fund for social protection based on solidarity and equity.
Thank you, Sulistri. You mentioned very well the important role to be played by the ILO in order to protect all workers. But I think there are also some role to be played by workers' organizations. And this is bringing me to the questions regarding the importance of the ILO Centenary Declaration and also the UN SDGs, and how unions can be able to implement this framework, and by shaping also the policy responses that government would like to design right now and ensure a better normal with the protection to all of workers. So my question is very simple. What can unions do in order to advocate for these two instruments first, but also to make sure that these two instruments will be part of the different policy responses that government are designing now for the recovery? Sulistri?
Yeah, so to set the policy responses, unions should take an active role on social dialogue in the bipartite and tripartite mechanism. To have an effective social dialogue, we have to protect the foundation of social dialogue, which is a freedom of association and the right to organize and collective bargaining. We are very concerned because in Indonesia, we are experiencing a setback on social dialogue. The government is using the crisis responses like lockdown and health protocol to adopt controversial law, like the omnibus law on job creation. Wages is undermining the role of the trade union on setting wages and is weakening the effective of bipartite and tripartite mechanism. Unilateral decision making, which jeopardizes the role of the trade union in time of crisis and shrinks the democratic space in the country. Unfortunately, not only happen in Indonesia. This situation also happen in other countries like Myanmar, Philippines, and India. It seems that to attract private investment, this crisis caused by the pandemic become a legitimate excuse for some government to take controversial measures to suppress democratic institutions like a trade union. So as a representative of workers, trade union continue to fight for the realization of decent work, social protection for all, and also universal healthcare.
Peter, thank you, Sulistri. Peter, you mentioned earlier about the need for us to take advantage of the different opportunities that we have. One of these opportunities are definitely the ILO Centenary Declaration, but also the UN SDGs. So my question to you will be to know, are you optimists about the ability of unions to shape the policy responses by ensuring the implementation of these two instruments?
I would hope that I could say that I was optimistic. I see the opportunities, but I also know the limitations, and I know the reservations. Though we adopted the Centenary Declaration 2 years ago, and there are many issues that are mentioned in the Centenary Declaration, and I think those who need most social protection and better opportunities to get access to the labor market, to go from informality to a formal job, to have access to education and training. All these issues are very, very well described in the Centenary Declaration. But again, we know from previous experiences that when it comes to the ratification and the implementation at the national level, speed is not impressive. And of course, some, I think wrongly, would see the crisis as an opportunity to do less when it comes in this area, which I think would be a gross mistake to go down that road. Because what I can say from a European point of view or a European perspective, what we are working on as trade unions together with the the Commission of the European Union, who is responsible, for instance, for the trade policy, we try to you can say to build in as much that is related to trade union issues like labor rights in various forms in the bilateral trade agreements that the European Union is concluding on behalf of its 27 member states. So this whole issue about sustainable development, both when it comes to the social issues and the environment, is extremely important. So you can say from a trade union perspective, this is something where we also see growing opportunities to in fact work together, the trade unions in Europe together with the trade unions, and of course also in some cases, or in many cases also with the employers in the countries where the EU has concluded or is about to conclude trade agreements. I think this is really important also to think about. This is a way where we can work together, you know, put some pressure also on countries to say, well, if you want to have access to sell your goods and services without tariffs and quotas, well, you have to deliver when it comes to the respect for international labor standards. And I really hope that we can continue to build on what we have already achieved. Of course, there is still, it's not everything that is related to international trade, and there are many groups, for instance, in the informal economy that are addressed in the Centenary Declaration. But at the end of the day, you can say it's also about how companies really take the full responsibility to include what we call the human rights due diligence in their supply chains. And that's really an issue that I hope to see some progress here in the coming years. I think really the employers and governments have a deep interest to create something that is sustainable for the future. And that also includes respect for human rights, for trade union rights, respect for democracy, and the involvement of the workers and the trade unions.
Thank you. We are approaching now to the end of these sessions, but before we close, let me ask you to each of you one question. What is your takeaway for unions and all the participants who are watching this live interview to ensure that a human-centered recovery can be done from this COVID-19 crisis? Let me start with you, Sulistri, in 1 minute. What is your takeaway from this?
Yes, I think union have to be adapt to the new situation, develop innovative ways to organize workers, especially in the informal economy and digital platform, strengthening representation and institution for the effective social dialogue. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our perspective on the importance of global solidarity across border and interdependence, not only between people, but we as human beings living in the planet with other living organisms. So we need a new social contract to build resilience and sustainability in a better normal.
Thanks, Sulistri. Now, question to you. What is your takeaway, Peter, from this conversation?
I think what is really to take away is the need that we work together globally, and that we should really also do our own homework. I have to say, we simply need to have our attention on how to be better organized in the future. There are no free lunches. We will not have anything served. We have to fight to get our rewards. And in some cases, what we have been rewarded can easily be taken away from us. So I think we really have to step up our global cooperation as trade unions, as workers. I think maybe what we have learned over this year is that we have also technological gain something that can maybe help us in the future to also learn from each other on how to do our organizing work better. But I think that's really an important issue. And the one last thing is occupational health and safety. It might be that some would say, well, that's not so important. I mean, after this pandemic, everybody should recognize that this should be a fundamental right to be enjoyed by all workers all around the world.
Thank you very much, Peter, and also Sulistri, for your excellent contributions during this live interview. I want also to thank our audiences who are watching this live interview via Zoom, but also via social media. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation with our two guests who join us from Indonesia, but also from Denmark. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both of you. But before we close these sessions, please note on your agenda two important rendezvous. The first one is the Workers' Voices, and we will continue this Workers' Voices series next week. The next sessions will be in French on the 17th of June, and we will conclude on the 19th of June with another sessions, but targeting mainly our Spanish speakers, mainly from Latin America and the Americas. So you are most welcome to attend these two series of the Workers' Voices, but also, as you know, we will have every day the ILO Daily Show, and I want to invite you to join these two rendezvous where we would like to discuss about the world of work conversations. I want to thank you very much for watching this Workers' Voice series, and I hope you enjoy it, and I want to thank you very much and see you soon. Bye to all of you.
Bye. Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Sulistri.
Bye.
Thank you, Mamadou.